The morning sun painted the New Mexico territory in shades of copper and gold, casting long shadows across the rugged landscape where civilization met the untamed wilderness. Sam Carter rode his weathered bay horse along the narrow canyon trail, the leather of his saddle creaking rhythmically with each step. The 42-year-old rancher had seen enough of life's harsh realities to know that trouble often wore many faces, but nothing could have prepared him for what awaited him in Devil's Canyon that fateful September morning in 1877. Sam's calloused hands gripped the reins loosely as he surveyed the rocky terrain ahead. His ranch, a modest spread of cattle and horses, lay 15 miles northeast, but these monthly supply runs to the trading post in Socorro had become as routine as breathing. The war paint of dawn was slowly giving way to the harsh light of day when the sound reached his ears, a sound that made his blood run cold. It wasn't the cry of a wounded animal or the whistle of wind through stone. It was something far more unsettling, the labored breathing of a human being in mortal distress, echoing off the canyon walls like a ghost's plea. Sam's horse snorted nervously, sensing the tension that suddenly gripped its rider. The rancher's weathered face, marked by years of desert sun and prairie wind, hardened with determination as he guided his mount toward the source of the sound. As he rounded a massive boulder, the sight that greeted him stopped him cold. There, propped against the red sandstone wall of the canyon, sat a man whose very presence spoke of both nobility and desperation. The stranger's long black hair, streaked with blood, hung in traditional braids adorned with eagle feathers. His bronze skin glistened with sweat and crimson, and the intricate beadwork on his buckskin shirt told Sam immediately what he was looking at. An Apache warrior, and by the looks of his regalia, not just any warrior, but one of high standing. The man's dark eyes, though clouded with pain, tracked Sam's approach with the alertness of a predator even in his weakened state. A crude bandage made from torn fabric was wrapped around his left shoulder, but blood had seeped through, staining the ground beneath him a dark rust color. His right hand rested on the handle of a knife, though Sam could see the warrior lacked the strength to draw it. For a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, the two men stared at each other across the divide of culture, history, and circumstance. Sam knew the risks Apache raids had been terrorizing settlements throughout the territory for months, and helping a wounded warrior could be seen as treason by his fellow settlers. But something in the man's eyes, a dignity that transcended the circumstances, spoke to Sam's conscience in a way that demanded action. Sam slowly dismounted, his boots hitting the sandy ground with a soft thud that echoed in the canyon's natural amphitheater. He kept his movements deliberate and non-threatening, his hands visible as he approached the wounded warrior. The Apache's grip on his knife handle tightened imperceptibly, but Sam could see the effort was costing him dearly. "Easy there, friend," Sam said in a low, steady voice, though he wasn't sure if the man understood English. "I'm not here to hurt you." To his surprise, the warrior spoke, his voice rough but clear. "You are the one called Carter, the man who does not poison the water holes." Sam stopped in his tracks, stunned. His reputation among the local tribes was something he'd never given much thought to, but apparently, his practice of keeping livestock away from natural springs during dry seasons had been noticed. The Apache had been watching, learning, cataloging the actions of every settler in the territory. "That's right," Sam replied, crouching down slowly until he was at eye level with the wounded man. Up close, he could see the full extent of the injuries. Besides the shoulder wound, there were cuts on the warrior's arms and a nasty gash on his forehead that had crusted over with dried blood. "What's your name?" The warrior's eyes studied Sam's face for a long moment before he answered. "I am Aiyana, son of Chief Naalnish of the Chiricahua." "You know this name?" Sam's breath caught in his throat. Chief Naalnish was legendary throughout the Southwest, a leader known for both his tactical brilliance and his efforts to maintain peace with settlers who showed respect for Apache lands. If this was his son, then Sam was looking at Apache nobility, a man whose death or rescue could have far-reaching consequences for the entire territory. "I know the name," Sam admitted, pulling his water canteen from his belt. "Your father is spoken of with respect, even among my people. Here, drink this." Aiyana accepted the water gratefully, his pride warring with his obvious need. As he drank, Sam examined the wounds more closely. The shoulder injury appeared to be from a rifle bullet that had passed through cleanly, but infection was already setting in, evidenced by the red streaks radiating from the wound site. "How long have you been here?" Sam asked, already knowing the answer would be too long. 2 days, maybe 3. The cavalry? They came at dawn. My hunting party was scattered. Aiyana's voice carried the weight of responsibility and loss that only a leader could understand. I drew them away from my men, but my horse fell in the rocks above. I thought I would die here, watching the buzzards circle. Sam looked up at the rim of the canyon where indeed several large birds wheeled patiently in the thermals. The sight sent a chill down his spine, not just for what it meant about Aiyana's condition, but for what it said about the warrior's courage. He had sacrificed himself to save his hunting party, accepting what he thought would be certain death rather than lead the cavalry to his companions. Without hesitation, Sam began tearing strips from his own shirt, fashioning proper bandages to replace the crude field dressing on Aiyana's shoulder. The warrior watched with curious eyes as the rancher worked with practiced efficiency, clearly experienced in tending wounds, a skill born of necessity in the harsh frontier life. "You know medicine?" Aiyana asked, wincing as Sam cleaned the wound with water from his canteen. "Some. Had to learn when you're days away from the nearest doctor." Sam's hands worked steadily, applying pressure to slow the bleeding. "Lost my wife to fever 3 years ago because I couldn't get her to town in time. Swore I'd never be helpless like that again." The admission hung between them, a bridge of shared loss and understanding. Aiyana's expression softened slightly, recognizing the pain that dwelt behind Sam's weathered features. "Your wife? She was a good woman?" "The best," Sam replied simply, his voice thick with memory. "She used to say that kindness was the only currency that mattered in this world, that helping others was just investing in the kind of world we wanted to live in." As Sam worked, applying a poultice made from plants he'd learned to identify over the years, Aiyana shared his own story. The hunting party had been seeking elk in the high country when the cavalry patrol had surprised them at dawn. Not soldiers from the local fort, but a rogue unit led by a man consumed with hatred for all Apache, regardless of their tribal affiliations or peaceful intentions. "This man, Captain Morrison, he does not care that my father seeks peace," Aiyana explained, his voice growing stronger as Sam's ministrations took effect. "He sees only Apache, and Apache must die. He has made war on women, children, elders, anyone with our blood." Sam's jaw tightened. He'd heard whispers about Morrison, a cavalry officer whose methods had grown increasingly brutal and indiscriminate. Official complaints had been filed, but the man had powerful friends in Washington who believed the only solution to the Indian problem was complete elimination. "Can you ride?" Sam asked, having done all he could for the wounds with his limited supplies. "My ranch isn't far, and I've got proper medical supplies there. Food, clean water, a safe place to recover." Aiyana's eyes widened slightly. The offer was extraordinary not just because Sam was risking his own safety, but because he was extending trust to a man his own people would consider an enemy. "Why?" the warrior asked simply. "Why would you risk this for me?" Sam was quiet for a moment, considering his answer. The truth was complex, woven from threads of conscience, memory, and a deep-seated belief that the cycle of violence consuming the territory would never end unless someone chose to break it. "Because my wife was right about kindness," he said finally, "and because I've seen enough good men die for bad reasons, maybe it's time for something different." Getting Aiyana onto Sam's horse proved to be a challenge that tested both men's resolve. The warrior's injuries, while not immediately life-threatening, had left him weakened and dizzy from blood loss. Sam fashioned a makeshift sling for the damaged shoulder and helped Aiyana mount behind him, securing the warrior with rope to prevent a fall during the journey. The ride to Sam's ranch took nearly 3 hours, winding through arroyos and across open grassland where cattle grazed peacefully under the watchful eye of the distant mountains. Aiyana drifted in and out of consciousness during the journey, his fever climbing as his body fought infection. Sam found himself talking steadily, partly to keep the warrior alert and partly to calm his own nerves about what he was doing. "That ridge there," Sam pointed with his free hand. "That's where I built my first shelter when I came out here in '71. Just a lean-to against the rocks, but it kept the rain off while I figured out where to put the house. Sarah, that was my wife, she took one look at it and said it reminded her of a doghouse." Sam chuckled at the memory. "Said if I was going to live like a dog, I might as well learn to howl at the moon properly." Behind him, Aiyana stirred. "She sounds wise woman." That she was. Could shoot straighter than most men, cook better than any restaurant in Santa Fe, and had a way of seeing the good in people even when they couldn't see it in themselves. The ranch, when it finally came into view, was modest but well maintained. The main house was built of adobe and timber, with a wide porch that faced east to catch the morning sunday. A barn and several outbuildings dotted the property, and a windmill turned lazily in the afternoon breeze, pumping water into a stock tank, where several horses stood drinking. Sam's nearest neighbors were 15 miles away, which had always been a source of isolation but now provided the privacy he desperately needed. As he helped Aiyana down from the horse and half-carried him toward the house, the rancher realized he was crossing a line from which there might be no return. Inside the house, Sam settled Aiyana on his own bed, the warrior's eyes taking in the simple but comfortable furnishings. Photographs on the wall showed Sam and a beautiful woman with kind eyes, presumably Sarah, along with images of the ranch in its early days. The Apache warrior noticed these details even through his fever-induced haze, cataloging information about this unusual white man who had chosen to help him. "You live alone now," Aiyana observed as Sam brought fresh water and began cleaning the wounds more thoroughly. "Since Sarah died, yes. Sometimes I think about getting married again, but—" Sam shrugged, focusing on his medical work. "Haven't found anyone who could measure up to her memory, I suppose." Over the next several hours, Sam tended to Aiyana with the dedication of a trained physician. He cleaned and rebandaged the wounds, administered willow bark tea for the fever, and gradually nursed small amounts of broth into the warrior. As night fell over the ranch, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple, both men began to feel cautiously optimistic about Aiyana's recovery. 3 days passed in a routine of careful nursing and gradual recovery. Aiyana's fever broke on the second night, and by the third day, he was able to sit up and take solid food. During these quiet hours, the two men talked extensively, sharing stories of their vastly different worlds and finding unexpected common ground. Aiyana spoke of his childhood in the mountain strongholds, learning the ways of the warrior and the sacred traditions of his people. He described the Apache relationship with the land, not as owners, but as caretakers responsible for maintaining balance with all living things. Sam, in turn, shared his journey from a Pennsylvania farm boy to a frontier rancher, driven west by dreams of independence and land ownership. "Your people," Aiyana said thoughtfully, "they see land as something to possess, like a horse or a rifle. My people see land as something that possesses us. We belong to it, not the other way around." Sam pondered this perspective as he worked on his ranch duties, checking on the cattle and maintaining the buildings. The philosophical differences between their cultures ran deep, yet he found himself drawn to the Apache way of thinking about humanity's relationship with nature. On the fourth morning, as Sam was preparing breakfast, he heard the sound that had been dreading, the thunder of approaching hoofbeats. Looking out the window, he saw a dust cloud rising from the direction of town, moving fast toward his ranch. His stomach clenched as he recognized the blue uniforms of cavalry soldiers riding hard in his direction. "Aiyana," he called urgently, rushing to the bedroom. "We've got company coming. Soldiers." The warrior's eyes snapped, fully alert, his hand instinctively reaching for weapons that weren't there. "How many?" "Looks like maybe 8 or 10. We need to get you hidden. Now." Sam's mind raced through options. The house had a small root cellar, but it would be one of the first places soldiers would look if they suspected anything. The barn offered more hiding spots, but Aiyana was still too weak to move quickly if discovered. Then Sam remembered the old mine shaft about 200 yards behind the house, partially collapsed but still accessible through a narrow opening. "Can you walk that far?" Sam asked, pointing toward the rocky hillside. "I will walk," Aiyana replied grimly, pulling himself to his feet with obvious effort. Moving as quickly as Aiyana's condition allowed, they made their way to the abandoned mine entrance. Sam helped the warrior climb down into the narrow passage, where a small chamber provided adequate hiding space. He handed down water, food, and a rifle. "If things go bad," Sam said quietly, "this passage leads to another opening about half a mile up the canyon. Follow it, and keep heading north toward your father's territory." Aiyana gripped Sam's wrist firmly. "If they discover what you have done, then I'll deal with it. Stay quiet and stay hidden until you're sure they're gone." Sam had barely made it back to the house when the cavalry patrol thundered into his yard, their horses lathered with sweat and their leader's face set in grim determination. Captain Morrison dismounted with aggressive purpose, his steel-gray eyes scanning the ranch buildings with the intensity of a predator searching for prey. "Carter," Morrison barked without preamble, "we're tracking wounded Apache through this area. Seen any sign of them?" Sam forced his expression to remain neutral, years of poker playing in frontier saloons serving him well. "Haven't seen any Apache, Wounded or otherwise, Captain. What makes you think they came this way? Morrison's suspicious gaze never wavered. Blood trail led toward this canyon before we lost it in the rocks. That Apache bastard took a bullet in the shoulder 3 days ago, and he's bleeding bad. He can't have gotten far. Well, you're welcome to search the property if you think it'll help, Sam offered, gambling that his apparent cooperation would throw Morrison off the scent. Coffee's hot if you and your men want some. The captain's eyes narrowed, clearly frustrated by Sam's helpful demeanor. He had obviously been hoping for signs of nervousness or evasion that would justify a more aggressive approach. Instead, he was faced with a rancher who seemed genuinely willing to cooperate with a military investigation. Sergeant Powell, Morrison called to one of his men, take 4 men and search every building on this property. Look for blood, bandages, food that's gone missing, anything that might indicate someone's been hiding here. As the soldiers began their systematic search, Morrison remained with Sam on the porch, his conversation probing for inconsistencies or signs of deception. You know, Carter, there are folks in town who think you're a little too friendly with the local tribes. Word is you've been seen trading with Apache at the spring gatherings. Trading's legal. Last I checked, Sam replied evenly. And profitable. Apache makes some of the finest silver jewelry and leather goods in the territory. Why wouldn't I trade with them if they're offering fair deals? Morrison's jaw tightened. Because they're savages, Carter. Murdering savages who'd scalp you as soon as look at you. The only good Apache is a dead Apache, and anyone who thinks different is either a fool or a traitor. The words hit Sam like physical blows, but he maintained his composure. This was the mentality that had driven the territory to the brink of all-out war. The same hatred that had led to massacres of peaceful villages and retaliatory raids that claimed innocent lives on both sides. I've never had trouble with any Apache I've dealt with fairly, Sam said carefully. Maybe respect goes both ways. Morrison's hand moved instinctively to his sidearm, his face darkening with anger. You'd better watch your mouth, rancher. In times like these, a man's loyalty gets questioned real quick if he says the wrong thing. The search of Sam's property stretched on for nearly 2 hours, with soldiers combing through every building, every storage area, and every possible hiding place they could think of. Sam watched with forced calm as they rifled through his personal belongings, overturned furniture, and even probed the hay in his barn with bayonets. His heart hammered against his ribs every time one of the soldiers ventured near the hillside where the mine entrance was hidden. But the overgrown brush and rocky terrain seemed to deter any serious investigation in that direction. Sergeant Powell finally returned to report their findings, or rather, their lack thereof. No sign of any Apache, Captain. No blood, no disturbed supplies, no tracks around the buildings. If there was a wounded Indian here, he's long gone now. Morrison's frustration was palpable. His conviction that Sam was hiding something warring with the complete absence of evidence to support his suspicions. He circled the ranch yard one more time, his trained eye searching for anything his men might have missed. You sure you haven't seen anything unusual in the past few days? Morrison pressed. Strange tracks, missing livestock, anything out of place? Nothing, Sam replied honestly. The only unusual thing had been Aiyana's presence, and Sam had been careful to eliminate any traces of the warrior's stay in the house. Finally, reluctantly, Morrison signaled his men to mount up, but before leaving, he stepped close to Sam, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. I don't know what your game is, Carter, but I'm watching you. This territory's going to be cleaned of Apache vermin one way or another, and anyone who stands in the way of that mission is going to find themselves in serious trouble. Sam met the captain's stare steadily. I'm just a rancher trying to make a living, Captain. Nothing more, nothing less. Morrison stared at him for a long moment, then spat in the dust at Sam's feet before mounting his horse. The patrol rode out as suddenly as they had arrived, leaving a cloud of dust and an atmosphere of unresolved tension hanging over the ranch. Sam waited a full hour after the last sound of hoofbeats had faded before making his way back to the mine entrance. He found Aiyana exactly where he had left him, the warrior's rifle trained on the narrow opening, ready to sell his life dearly if necessary. They're gone, Sam called softly into the passage. Coast is clear. Aiyana emerged from his hiding place moving more easily than he had in days, the enforced rest and Sam's medical care having worked their healing magic. His color had returned, and the wound in his shoulder, while still tender, no longer showed signs of infection. The one who led them, Aiyana said as they walked back toward the house. He is the one called Morrison? That's right, Captain James Morrison, out of Fort Stanton. He's got a particular hatred for your people. Aiyana nodded grimly. He is the one who killed my cousin's wife and children while they slept in their lodge. Peaceful people who had never raised a hand against any white man. The weight of that revelation settled over Sam like a dark cloud. He was beginning to understand that this conflict was far more personal and brutal than he had realized, and his decision to help Aiyana had placed him directly in the middle of a blood feud that showed no signs of ending. That evening, as they shared a meal by lamplight, Aiyana made an announcement that both surprised and troubled Sam. "Tomorrow, I must return to my people," the warrior said. "My father will be wondering what happened to our hunting party, and my extended absence will cause him to fear the worst." Sam had known this moment would come, but he found himself reluctant to see Aiyana leave. Over the past several days, their conversations had challenged many of his assumptions about Apache culture and had given him a perspective on the territorial conflict that few white settlers ever gained. "You're still not fully healed," Sam pointed out. "That shoulder needs more time. It will heal on the trail. I have imposed on your hospitality long enough, and my presence here puts you in danger." Aiyana's dark eyes were serious. "Morrison suspects you helped me. He will be watching, waiting for proof." They spent that final evening sharing stories and insights, both men knowing that their paths might never cross again under such peaceful circumstances. Aiyana spoke of his hopes for a future where Apache and white settlers could coexist, sharing the vast lands of the Southwest, without the constant specter of warfare hanging over both peoples. "My father believes that the old ways of constant conflict must change," Aiyana explained. "The white man's numbers grow like grass after rain, and our people cannot fight them all forever. But men like Morrison make peace seem impossible." Sam nodded thoughtfully. "There are good men on both sides who want peace, but it's always the loudest voices that get heard, the ones calling for blood." As dawn broke over the ranch, Sam prepared supplies for Aiyana's journey: food, water, medicine for his wound, and clean clothes to replace his blood-stained buckskins. He also provided something unexpected: a letter written in careful script. "What is this?" Aiyana asked, examining the sealed envelope. "A message to your father," Sam explained. "It explains who I am, what happened, and that you were treated as an honored guest in my home. If there's ever a time when our peoples might try to make peace, maybe it'll be worth something." Aiyana accepted the letter with grave ceremony, understanding its significance. In a world where trust between Apache and white settlers was virtually non-existent, Sam's written testimony carried enormous weight. They walked together to where Sam's horse was saddled and ready, the bay mare that would carry Aiyana back toward the mountain strongholds where his people waited. As the warrior mounted, he turned back to face the rancher who had saved his life. "You have given me more than medicine and shelter," Aiyana said solemnly. "You have given me hope that the future might be different than the past." Sam gripped the warrior's outstretched hand firmly. "Take care of yourself out there, and remember, if you or your people ever need a friend, my door is always open." With that, Aiyana rode out, heading north toward the distant peaks where the morning sun painted the mountainsides in shades of gold and purple. Sam watched until horse and rider disappeared into the heat shimmer of the desert, feeling as though he had just witnessed something that might prove to be historically significant. Weeks passed quietly at the ranch, with Sam falling back into the routine of cattle ranching and the solitary life he had known since Sarah's death. The seasonal work of autumn kept him busy rounding up cattle for winter feeding, repairing fence lines damaged by summer storms, and laying in supplies for the harsh months ahead. But despite the familiar rhythm of ranch life, Sam found his thoughts often turning to Aiyana and wondering if the warrior had reached his people safely. Morrison's patrol had not returned, but Sam sometimes felt as though he was being watched from afar. Whether it was paranoia or genuine surveillance, he couldn't be sure, but he maintained his normal routines and gave no indication that anything had changed in his quiet life. The first sign that events were moving beyond his control came on a crisp October morning when Sam discovered fresh horse tracks around his property, unshod hoofprints that could only belong to Indian ponies. The tracks circled the ranch buildings at a distance, as if the riders had been conducting a careful reconnaissance without wanting to be seen. That afternoon, while checking on cattle in the north pasture, Sam became aware that he was not alone. The prickle of unseen eyes watching him made the hair on the back of his neck stand up, and his hand moved instinctively to the rifle in his saddle scabbard. But instead of the hostile presence he half expected, what emerged from the rocks and sagebrush were 3 Apache warriors, sitting their ponies with the easy grace of men born to horseback. The leader was an older man, perhaps 60, with silver-streaked hair and the bearing of natural authority. His weathered face was marked by the kind of deep lines that spoke of years spent squinting into desert sun and making decisions that affected the lives of his people. Even before the man spoke, Sam knew he was looking at Chief Naalnish himself. "You are the one called Carter," the chief said in careful English, his voice carrying the weight of command and dignity. "The man who saved the life of my son." Sam inclined his head respectfully, recognizing that this moment required careful handling. "I am. And you are Chief Naalnish. Your son spoke of you with great respect." The chief studied Sam for a long moment, his dark eyes seeming to look directly into the rancher's soul. Behind him, the other two warriors waited motionless, their hands near their weapons but not threatening guards ready to respond to their chief's lead. "Aiyana has told me of your kindness," Naalnish continued, "of how you found him dying in the canyon, tended his wounds, fed him from your own table, and hid him from the blue-coat soldiers who would have killed him." Sam shifted uncomfortably in his saddle, unused to being the subject of such formal acknowledgement. Any decent man would have done the same thing. A slight smile crossed the chief's weathered features. "That is where you are wrong, Carter. In these times, very few men would have done what you did. Most would have left my son to die. Or worse, would have turned him over to Morrison for the bounty." The mention of Morrison sent a chill down Sam's spine. "There's a bounty? Morrison has offered $50 for proof of any Apache death, $100 for proof of a warrior's death, and $200 for the capture of my son alive." The chief's voice carried bitter knowledge of the captain's methods. He wants Aiyana to make an example to show that even the son of a chief is not beyond his reach. The weight of what Chief Naalnish had just revealed settled over Sam like a physical burden. He had risked not just his own safety, but had turned down what amounted to more money than most frontier settlers saw in a year. The chief seemed to read his thoughts. "This surprises you? That you could have claimed such wealth by betraying my son?" Sam nodded slowly. "I suppose I never thought about it that way. I just saw a man who needed help." Chief Naalnish dismounted from his horse, a gesture that his warriors immediately mirrored. The old chief approached Sam's horse, and Sam found himself dismounting as well, sensing that this conversation was about to become far more significant than a simple expression of gratitude. "Carter," the chief said, his voice taking on a formal, ceremonial quality, "by the laws of my people, you have saved the life of my heir, the future leader of the Chiricahua, Apache. This creates a debt that can never be fully repaid, but it also creates a bond that can never be broken." The chief reached into a leather pouch at his belt and withdrew an ornate silver medallion, its surface engraved with symbols that spoke of Apache tradition and power. The medallion was suspended from a leather thong decorated with eagle feathers and turquoise beads. "This is the mark of the protected friend," Naalnish explained, placing the medallion around Sam's neck with ceremonial gravity. "It means that you and yours are under the protection of the Chiricahua Apache for all time. Any Apache who sees this symbol will know that you are to be treated as family, defended as family, and honored as family." Sam looked down at the medallion, overwhelmed by the magnitude of the gesture. "Chief Naalnish, I don't know what to say. There is more," the chief continued. "From this day forward, if you ever have any need you have but to send word, and the full strength of my people will come to your aid. If enemies threaten your lands, we will drive them away. If drought threatens your cattle, we will share our knowledge of hidden water sources. If loneliness fills your heart, you will always have a place at our fires." One of the warriors stepped forward, leading a magnificent black stallion whose coat gleamed like polished obsidian in the afternoon sunday. The horse was clearly a prize animal, its bloodlines evident in every line of its powerful frame. "This is Windrunner," the chief explained, "the fastest horse in our herd, sired by my own war pony. He is yours, along with this." He gestured to an elaborate rifle scabbard decorated with intricate beadwork and silver conchos. "The rifle within was taken from a cavalry officer who thought to hunt my people for sport. It seems fitting that it should go to a man who chose healing over hunting." Tears that Sam hadn't expected began to blur his vision as the full impact of this extraordinary gesture settled over him. These people, whom his own society labeled as savage enemies, were demonstrating a level of honor and gratitude that humbled him to his core. "There's something else you should know," Chief Naalnish said, his voice softening with what might have been affection. "Aiyana has spoken much of your late wife, of how her wisdom guided your actions even after her death. He believes her spirit still watches over you, still guides you to do good in this world. Sam's throat constricted with emotion. The idea that Sarah's influence had somehow led him to save Aiyana, and that this act of kindness had opened doors to friendship and understanding that seemed impossible just weeks before, filled him with a sense of purpose he hadn't felt since her death. "My people have a saying," the chief continued. "That kindness is like water in the desert. It seems small and insignificant, but it can transform the landscape and give life where there was only death. You, Carter, have been like water in the desert. You have changed the landscape of possibility between our peoples." As the sun began to set behind the distant mountains, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and red, Chief Naalnish and his warriors prepared to depart. But before mounting their horses, the chief had one final revelation. "Morrison and his rogue patrol have been transferred far from this territory," he said with evident satisfaction. "It seems that certain evidence of his unauthorized activities reached the right ears in Washington. He will trouble neither your people nor mine again." Sam stared at the chief in amazement. "How did you? Never underestimate the reach of Apache intelligence, my friend. We see much, and we have learned that sometimes the white man's own laws can be more effective weapons than arrows or bullets." As the Apache party rode away into the gathering dusk, Chief Naalnish called back one final time. "Remember, Carter, the bond we have forged today extends to your children and your children's children. The Chiricahua Apache will not forget what you have done." Sam stood in his ranch yard long after the last echo of hoofbeats had faded, the medallion around his neck catching the final rays of sunlight. The magnificent black stallion nuzzled his shoulder gently, as if recognizing his new master and offering comfort in this moment of overwhelming emotion. For the first time since Sarah's death, Sam Carter felt truly connected to something larger than himself, part of a web of friendship and mutual respect that transcended the artificial boundaries of race and culture. He understood now that the simple act of showing compassion to a wounded stranger had opened a door to possibilities he had never imagined. As he led Windrunner to the barn and began settling the magnificent horse for the night, Sam found himself speaking aloud to Sarah's memory, sharing with her the incredible events of the day and the promise they held for a different kind of future in the American Southwest. The desert wind whispered through the sagebrush as darkness settled over the ranch, carrying with it the eternal promise that kindness, when given freely and without expectation of reward, has the power to change the world in ways both profound and lasting. And in that desert wind, Sam could swear he heard the echo of Sarah's laughter, approving of the choice he had made and the friendship he had found in the most unlikely of circumstances. The cycle of violence that had plagued the territory for so long had been broken, if only in one small corner of the vast wilderness. But sometimes, Sam reflected as he gazed up at the star-filled sky, one small act of decency was enough to plant the seeds of a better tomorrow.